What's up, y'all? I'm Oteil.
And I'm Mike, and we are on Patreon.
Get on the bus, you guys. Get your bus pass. We put out an additional episode every week where we answer questions from you, or sometimes we may just get off on a tangent about something important or cool that happened that day or a couple days ago.
Yeah, it's Oteil and I catching up, and you are invited. So if you head to patreon.com/comesatimepod, you can join us. You can get the bus pass. We have some incredible merch coming soon. We've got a lot of great surprises. So we would love to have you guys head on over.
Yes, most of all, we want to connect with you. So get on the bus, y'all. Welcome back to Comes a Time. I'm Oteil.
And I'm Mike. And we got another great one for you guys this week from Chicago Beyond. And a real superhero, Liz Dozier. I mean, this one, again, a favorite, an instant favorite.
Yeah, I told my wife, if there's any one of these podcasts you don't want to miss, this is the one. I've already said that like 4 times. Yeah. But really, this is the one. She has an amazing story of turning around this high school in Chicago called Finger that was just, in such bad shape. Like she said, you can't even call it a school. Like what? Right. We couldn't imagine our kids going through this at all. And
verge of collapse, really.
Yeah, and she turned it around, and then after that started this program called Chicago Beyond, which, it's kind of empowering people and going even beyond Chicago, like the name says. And her story is just unreal.
Yeah, and it's another one of those great interviews that we did that just showed vulnerability, openness, like breaking down and disrupting, redefining and rebuilding, and it's what we're all doing right now. So it was an honor to interview her. She'll definitely be back. Another instant friendship. So
absolutely, she had some great quotes that stuff that I wanted to touch on that we didn't even get to. But there's, she was talking at one point about kids being written off, and they're just, these are the bad kids. And when I was doing research into her, she said this thing. We're all better than the worst thing we've ever done.
Yeah, dude. And that South by Southwest talk.
Yeah. None of us is as good as we can be. She's like, these are kids. You have them they're like, we look at them as super predators or like the boogeyman or whatever. It's like, these are kids.
Some children.
Yeah. Some of them are trapped in some crazy stuff. Some of them are in some violent situations. Some of them are causing violence. But, look at the situation they're in. Like, right. I just love that. It's that, no person left behind kind of attitude that she has. It's just.
Dude, it's so funny that you said those 2 quotes because those hit me. I heard that about 2 hours before we started with her today. And what followed that was what her mother said, that when you have one finger pointing out, you got 3 pointing back at you. And that's another, so take a look at yourself before you judge. And that's, it all boils down to it's education. It's the future. It's human rights. So we're honored to have her, and you guys will love the interview, and we love you for listening. And this is coming to you on Osiris, which we are a proud member of the Osiris family. You can check out all the pods at osirispod.com, and you could check out our Patreon, where you get a bonus episode with Oteil and I at patreon.com/comesatimepod. You can send us questions, stories, questions on past episodes, and we chat. We get deep. We leave you some homework. It's a real fun time. So join us over there. Get your bus pass and enjoy this episode. We'll catch you soon, everybody.
Comes a time when the blind man takes your hand, says, don't you see?
Welcome back to Comes a Time, folks. We have Liz Dozier with us today. Hi, Liz.
Hello.
Look at how cool you look in that awesome room.
Just saying. It's what I do.
You said it was a phone booth in your building?
It is. So Chicago Beyond, which is an organization I founded about 4.5 years ago, just finally moved into its own space. in the West Loop in Chicago. And so we built out the space. And so part of what was really important to us was to have it reflective of all of Chicago. And so art is a big part of Chicago. Communities are a big part of Chicago. And so we had local artists. This particular artist is from Pilsen, which is a neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, primarily Mexican neighborhood. He does this thing called graffiti calligraphy. And so you can't really see it because we're kind of zoomed in on it because it's, focused on, neck up. But if you were to pull back, you would see that in this graffiti calligraphy, he has a statement that says, "I'm not free until we are free." And so it's pretty cool. It's black and white, pretty cool room to be in. Very tiny, but very cool.
the coolness of that room, and it's a tiny room, makes me think that entire office is filled with amazing art from top to bottom. Huh?
Yeah, all local artists.
Oh,
yeah,
that's so cool.
All local artists.
Stimulating place to work for sure.
Yeah. We wanted it to feel relaxed, right? We wanted it to feel like you could come in here and see pieces of Chicago. You kind of, if you're a Chicagoan, you could see yourself reflected in the space. So oftentimes you go into quote unquote office spaces and they're just so sterile and so dry. And we wanted it to really reflect the vibrancy of communities, what they represent here in Chicago. So yeah, you got to come by and visit once we get off, our COVID lockdown quarantine life. You got to come by and visit.
I'd love to.
I love Chicago.
Yeah.
Such a great, I performed there a couple times and gone to concerts there. And it's just, what an unbelievable city.
Yeah, it is. It's complex, but it is as well as it is beautiful.
Yeah. Sure. I was really struck just watching YouTubes on you and watching you talk, and it's so many of the themes that we cover on the show, especially recently with since George Floyd. You just were hitting every one of them. I was like, yeah, be my favorite. Yes, especially what you said about disrupting and disrupting the status quo. That's a huge thing for me, But before we get into that, let's let some of our viewers that may not know you know where you started. Like was that high school, elementary, or up through high?
Yeah, so I started my school principal career at Finger High School. And so just to give the audience a little kind of flavor, in case you're not from Chicago or from the Midwest, Finger High School is located on the far south side of Chicago. At the time when I got there, it had about 1,400 young people, so 9th grade through 12th grade. And it was one of the lowest performing schools in not just the city, but in the state of Illinois. And so what that looked like was there were, I think 1,400 kids. We had about a 20% dropout rate every single year. 20% of our kids are dropping out. We had about a 40% graduation rate. So if you walked into our doors at Finger High School as a freshman, only 40% of that class would ever graduate from high school.
Jeez.
There were 300 arrests inside of the school building, not on the school grounds, not 2 blocks away from school, inside of the school building that first year. It just was not a place you would want to send your worst enemy in terms of education. It just was, I don't know how to even describe it. It just wasn't a school. And so, but it was supposed to be a school. So my team and I were there for 6 years, and through work with, community members and parents and kids, over time, the school shifted. And so that we didn't change the kids, the community didn't shift. It was all about giving young people what they needed. And, everything from anger management to grief counseling to academic interventions, tutoring. I mean, just making the school a place of safety, a place of where people could come and be who they are. Roseland's a very complicated community where the school is. A lot of violence, a lot of things were happening. And so when we did that, those simple, basic human things, they're just human things, the things we give our own kids, our own nieces or nephews or sons or daughters, it shifted. And so that graduation rate went from 40% to over 80%. the dropout rate went from 20% every single year to less than 2%. It was like 1.1 or something. And the arrests went down from 300 a year to less than 10 per year. And it became a place, people literally came from all over the country, from, as far as like California, down in Florida. We had people come from overseas, from Japan, from the UK, to come and see what was it that we were doing at Finger High School, because we didn't change the kids. The kids were the same kids, to see those shifts and stuff. So that's a little bit of the background of Finger High School. That
gets exactly to the point that I've been the most mad about, and that I reiterate the most times. Like, I don't know what the level of investment money to just personal investment that was over that 6-year period, but I'm guessing it was more personal investment, like straight from the people to the parents to the kids, right? And have this incredible turnaround. So think if these communities weren't defunded, right? They get mad at us talking about defunding the police, but I'm like, you didn't blink an eye defunding the community of like everything, right? And it wasn't even really controversial. Like that guy in the interview you talked about, he said, 24% of these kids don't want to learn anything, and we shouldn't throw money at them. That's just another way of saying, we're not going to give it any money. We're just going to defund it.
Yeah.
It's that bad. It's just unpatriotic, really. Like, why would you throw your own kids away?
Yeah. I just never got the human element of that. I always think people can say those type of things because they're not interacting with kids like they're their kids. Like, nobody says for their own children, well, let's just like throw my son or daughter away. People give their last and their everything to make sure their kids are successful. And unfortunately, like some of our communities, I really feel like we haven't even given our kids the first step. I mean, when you look at, when we got to Finger High School, and I think about just some of the basic textbooks and how education was structured. I mean, it wasn't even like the kids were getting the bare minimum bottom basic education. It was like below even what that is. And so, I don't know, I just think that if we looked at our educational system as if it was truly an investment in our country's future, which I believe it is.
It's the investment in our country's future.
I mean, like, we wouldn't be doing crazy things like funding it based on property taxes, but I won't go down that whole train. But, I mean, it's just kind of like
But that is the whole train. Like, I don't mind. Like, that's the train that we have to disrupt.
Yeah.
Like, these are American kids. Like, just throw them away. What do you do?
Totally.
It's insanity. You need to treat them like you would your own kids, And
every other, when I think about, I said this in a talk I gave a couple years ago, I was talking about simple things like, Amazon and Airbnb, like how these respective industries have been completely like born out of like nothing, and they were disrupted. They disrupted the hotel industry, how we think about moving, and the taxi, that whole industry completely disrupted. But yet, like, we still haven't disrupted the way we educate, our young people, especially when it comes to those young people who are, most living in poverty. And it shouldn't be that way, because we have the capability to move fast. We have the capability to do better.
Especially with the technology, right? I mean, it's the will.
Well, it's a lot of those people, when you had that team, and I mean, the unbelievable part of you doing that, it's your first principal job. This is your first gig, and you get it's not like you had a couple schools to practice on. You cut your teeth.
There was no tee up.
But I'm sure that took a lot of, you being vulnerable and saying, I need help.
I loved when you were saying like, hey, I got to confess, I did something wrong. Yeah. Like, I made this board. I basically just categorized everybody kind of the same way society does. Like, these are the worst ones, and these are kind of halfway. Maybe we could save them, and these are the best. And then you were like, okay, that's not going to work.
Yeah. I mean, I really thought it was. I mean, guys, I thought I had figured something out. Okay. I was going to categorize these kids. And if you're in the red zone, you're rolling up out of here. And then somehow all the green kids and the yellow kids, we're all going to, they're going to do fine. And it didn't work as much as I thought it was going to work. It didn't work. And that's when I realized, we can't arrest our way to excellence. We cannot,
Right.
With kids, especially like this idea of like, we're going to just load on punishment and load on consequences. It just doesn't ultimately get us to excellence. What we had to do, and what I personally had to do as a leader, was really shift the question from what's wrong with you. Because I would literally walk in the building some days when I got there, and I would look around like, what is wrong with you? Like, what is wrong with what's wrong with these kids? What is
I
wrong?
do that with my own kids now a lot. I'm like, what is wrong with you?
What is wrong with you? It's crazy. But then what really shifted the whole game for us is when I changed the question from what's wrong with you to what's happened to you. Yeah. And that's a totally different question. And when you come from and questions are important because they lead us ultimately down the path to answers, or at least how we're going to approach a solution. And when I changed that question from what's wrong with you to what's happened to you, it fundamentally shifted how not only I showed up every day with 1,400 kids, but how as a school community, how we showed up in relationship with our kids and how we tried to best serve their needs, so.
That's amazing. And I think with disrupting, it automatically comes redefining, right? So when you take a look at a school system or any system, an environment like a school, and you disrupt past beliefs, you have to look at, okay, what are we calling punishments now? How do we deal with in-school suspensions? Is it, you put students in a room and they just sit? I read about some schools that used meditation as a form of, it wasn't a punishment, it was more just quiet time. And in the morning and before you left school, did you implement a lot of different strategies like that where you would say, like, let's redefine what a reward is. Let's redefine what a punishment is.
Yeah, we did. And actually, right before I decided I was going to leave Bangor High School, we were on the meditation train. Like, I really wanted to institute meditation at the beginning of the school day and at the end of the school day as a part of just how we did school. Ultimately, I left before I got to see it through, but we did. I mean, I think because we had to. So when I think about simple things, like I'll use a very, 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 very simple thing, but like graffiti. There was this idea, if you look at the Uniform Discipline Code for the school district at that time, if you, let's say you write all over a wall or throw gang signs up on a wall, or whatever the thing was. There was this idea you would then have either a suspension or you'd have some type of like punitive consequence. And so let's say you do suspend the child, you put them out for 2 days because they wrote on the wall. Ultimately, what does that really teach them? Because what they really did was harm to the community. So they made the actual physical environment either not as safe or, they kind of muddied it, if you will. And it's so much more powerful to, instead of like just putting the kid out of school, to actually have that kid sit down and have a conversation and help them understand how they did harm to the community, the school community, and then have them actually repair that harm. So instead of having the kid out on a 2-day suspension and then janitors there like cleaning repainting the walls, like sitting down with that kid and then having a conversation with that child, then having that child go fix what they actually did. And it's just a much more powerful way to do it. And so we were big believers in restorative justice. We were big believers and proponents of peace circles. And so when kids would have conflict with one another, we would have peace circles. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with those at all. But those type of things.
A peace circle to us probably might mean something a little different. Being in the concert world.
Well, it's definitely not the concert world peace circle, I'll tell you that much. It's definitely not that, Mike. Not that.
You need like a nationwide peace circle, right?
Right.
I know, really.
Right. So yeah, there were several things that we did. And ultimately, what I learned at Bangor helped me, is really built into the DNA of what I'm up to now, which is that like truly like all people, like regardless of their zip code, zip codes are one of the biggest predictors of life outcomes, which is to me just abysmal, like in the United States of America, but it's true. All people regardless of zip code should have the chance to live their fullest human potential. And we need to be supporting ways to do that, really.
That's my big thing personally, is this whole bootstraps bullshit, because it's just not true. Like my son, I grew up in Southeast Washington. My son has a way more, nice bubble than that,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going to a small private school. It's like his bootstraps are very expensive. That's like, I don't want to hear that,
Yeah.
we don't just leave everybody to, fend for themselves. While these parents going to jail for paying their way in their kids' school, like nobody's doing that. We're all either the country helps, or we all help each other, or you just like, don't give a shit about the sons and daughters of America, or part of them anyway. So I really wanted to get into that with you. Like, I guess going out of Finger, that's kind of what you're doing more with Chicago Beyond. Just
Yeah. So I left Finger probably, I guess it's been 5 years ago now. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I just really had no idea. I traveled for a bit. So I left Finger. And actually, I should say why I left Finger. So I left Finger because I was so tired of losing students. So we had there's a lot of violence in the neighborhood. And as a result of that, we had a lot of kids die. And so I was always the principal who was most invested in and involved with my kids who were sort of on the fringes, of choices that weren't the best for their lives. And so they might be involved in gangs or those types of things. And so, unfortunately, I just lost a lot of students. And in my final year at Finger, I went to a young man's funeral, Shamari Salter. And Shamari had graduated from Finger and went off to college, and then unfortunately was sitting in a car one night and was just gunned down with him and two other young men who actually were in college. They were kind of home for the weekend. And I was just there's something, I don't know if you guys have, hopefully you have not been, but if maybe some of the audience has, but like, if you've ever been to a child's funeral versus like an adult's funeral, there's something that's just so distinctly disturbing of hearing like mothers mourn for their children. It's always the same across every funeral. I've been to dozens of them, but dozens of kids that I've known that have died. And so I was just tired. I was tired. I couldn't emotionally, I was like, I cannot bear yet another young person that I know. And then the second thing, I remember sitting in my office that school year, and I was meeting with a special education teacher, and we were planning, was helping her plan, her lesson plan for the day, the next day. And we were sitting there, maybe like within a couple feet of one another in my office at a table, and we heard gunshots. And she said to me, she's like, "Is that somebody shooting outside?" And I said, "Yeah, I think that is somebody shooting outside." And so we got up, we looked out the window, we couldn't really see anybody. Probably like 7 shots or so were fired. And both of us, because she had been there for longer than I had been at Finger. She had been there probably, maybe 10 years even before I had been there. And we both kind of sat back down. And this is now, again, this is my 6th year at the school at this point. We both sat back down and we decided we finished lesson planning. And school's in session, by the way. So there are kids actually in the school building. This is not like, it's 7 o'clock and kids are there. And like neither one of us thought to call the police. Not that we thought about the police and said, we're not going to call. We didn't think, and not because there's like some type of underlying issue with the police at that point. It was more of about, if you can imagine being in a community where gunshots become almost like singing birds. Like, have you ever heard singing birds when you wake up in the morning, but you don't really hear them? They're kind of like in the background.
Right.
And that's what it had become. And so, I decided to leave, and that, I had done all I could do. We had, those numbers I told you about, graduation had gone up, dropout had gone down. We had all this, books had come out, TV shows had happened. Like, I felt I had done all I could do, and it was time for me to move on. And so, I traveled for a bit. I was in Israel. I went to Italy. I was at a friend's farm out in Ohio doing a whole lot of nothing with the cows and just like there. And then that's when I had the opportunity to start something from scratch. And that's when I started Chicago Beyond. So, yeah.
That's great. You took that self-care time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leader burnout is a huge thing. And, you talk to anybody that's in a position of being told no by the municipality over and over. When you say, I need funding, we need resources, we need teachers, we need better health care. And they go, we don't have it, but I'll be back in 3 weeks. I have to, go on my yacht around the, the lake. So that's the problem quite a bit. But also, what I wanted to ask you was like the TV shows, the documentaries, the exposure, the media exposure, was that, it obviously opened up a lot of eyes, and it probably opened up a lot of eyes about other communities where they said, we can do this. Have you heard about any of the, trickle down effect that you had caused with other schools that you maybe got started or got implemented?
Yeah, so I'll answer that, but I want to come back to what you guys were starting on. Like, I'm curious of what you think changes that. Like what changes that setup, that dynamic of like people kind of pushing schools and communities away, and we'll get to that later over there. I got to go do this over here, as if that's not important. I'm curious what you both think about that. But I'll answer your question first if you want. But I'm curious, like, you go first. I want to know what changes that, because that has fundamentally got to shift.
It's corruption for me. It always comes back to money. Like I can list everything, every facet of society that's wrong ecologically, spiritually, scientifically, whatever, economically. It just all seems to come back to money. Like money is the most important, because, there's one way you could kind of continue this whole school to prison pipeline thing. There's a lot of money being made. There's money being made off the drugs in the community. There's money being paid to a lot of public officials to let these gazillion-dollar enterprises go on while Eric Garner is getting killed over selling Lucy cigarettes. You know what I mean? And then there's money being made in the system. There's money being made off people in the private prisons. It's like you can make money off these kids if they don't die, and the guns, they're making money off the guns, they're making money off the drugs. So that's my big thing, is like how you fight the corruption,
And I agree with you. And we talk a lot about how, this whole thing is just keeping the poor fighting the poor so the rich can do what they want. But I think also it's a lot of justifying someone's position. Like if you look at what's going on with Congress, somehow can't figure out how much we deserve in unemployment and how much we deserve in pandemic relief. And they take a 2-week recess. And I mean, it's literally like a starving person is having a sandwich passed over their head. And they're going, well, we don't have to give them 3/4 of the sandwich. Maybe give them a bite for the next 3 weeks. And if they didn't get a bite last week, give them 2 bites. But we can't really figure out how to give them what they need. We're going to need 2 weeks to think about it. So are we going to my golf course or are we going to yours? And that's just, I feel if that's the example of government, then why wouldn't smaller governments who are basically just kind of ankle biting, why don't, it's kind of like perception is reality. You do what the pros do. I think a lot of that has to do with just the way that it's sad to me that I think that it's a big, huge thing about this is just admitting that they don't know. They can't admit that they don't know what's going on. They won't take the time to go into your school and see how much money is needed. And like you said, you don't throw your own kids out. I think a lot of this is out of sight, out of mind, and it's justifying their positions. If it takes them longer to make a decision, then why would anybody get rid of them when it comes to contract renewal time or election time or, anything that has to do with, give me another year in my seat. Let's just stretch it out. I mean, it's pretty simple that, the money gets put in the wrong places. And if it gets put in the right places, then maybe we won't need them anymore. You know what I mean? So I think it's that holding on.
I guess if I could see, you just do like if the drugs wouldn't be allowed in a richer neighborhood, it just wouldn't be allowed like that to that level. But because they're poor, because they're black or brown or poor white, whatever, like they just get written off. So I don't know how to defeat that, but what you were your theme about disrupting the status quo. I mean, you ever feel like it was going to get you killed? Like, if you called out, because that's people don't like it if you mess with their money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever felt like that. I always built really great relationships, and I was just always from the fundamental. I just always have believed that there's narratives about people in communities, and about violence. But when you really peel back all the layers, it's a bunch of human beings. And honestly, I don't think are any different than the three of us. And so for me, I'd be out in the community with the, I just remember one time the New York Times had come and they were doing some type of story. And I forget, this was like, in the middle of my principalship, so probably like year 4 or something like that. And they'd come out to do a story and they sent a photographer out. And so the photographer, it was on the weekend. And so it was myself, another gentleman named Steve Gates, who actually works with me now at Chicago Beyond, but at the time was with me at Finger. And he worked with my young men who were, in gangs and trying to make better decisions and get out of that life. And so Steve and I went out to go, find some kids out in the community, and we're going to do like this, have a conversation. They were going to do some pictures and blah, blah, blah. And so we show up on the block. Okay. It's a Saturday. We show up on the block to this trap house. Do you guys know what a trap house is? Or is that
for the listeners?
For listeners, not for you guys. I'll explain for listeners. So a trap house is basically like a house that is like abandoned, but people will go in it and they'll have parties or they'll, smoke dope or whatever the thing is, like in the house, but it's an abandoned house. And so it's usually like really run down. So we pull up and we're kind of riding around the block looking for the kids. Finger High School is a neighborhood school. And so we pull up and we see all these kids, like, who are involved in, activities that are not legal. And they were all outside of this house, probably like 20 kids. And they're sitting there in the middle of the day. And so then, they see the photographer person get out who they don't recognize and nobody moves. And then they see, Mr. Gates, Steve Gates get out, and you see them kind of like moving their heads and looking like, what's Mr. Gates doing here? And then I get out. Keep in mind, I'm in flip-flops and a yellow dress. It's like Sunday, okay? Or Saturday. I get out and then somebody screams like, it's Miss Dozier. And then like all the kids go running. You know what I'm saying? Like all the kids go running. And so I just say all that to say that like, relationships matter, and like we have this perception of like kids who are in gangs or kids who are this, but at the end of the day, they're kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're here in my yellow dress and flip flops. What the hell do you think I'm going to do? You know what I'm saying? Like, but they're kids. And so I never feared. I feared for my kids' lives, because of the experience of bearing so many of them, but I never feared for mine in terms of would somebody intentionally try to harm me or shoot me? I mean, I feared at times like I would accidentally get shot, in crossfire or something like that, but never like would somebody would try to harm me, Well,
I wasn't thinking the kids. I was thinking public
corruption.
But that's a great story though, to realize like, when we're talking about policing, you're in flip-flops and a yellow dress and the big bad gang was scattered. You didn't have a gun. You didn't have a badge. You had a relationship with them. They're like, hey, we shouldn't be doing what we're doing right now. And so y'all, and that's beautiful. Like the police should know about that. Like the police were from the neighborhood, or I don't know what the solution is, but I know if you could do it without the badge and the gun, we could change things,
Thank you for being a part of Comes a Time podcast. It's an honor to bring this to you with my pal Oteil. Enjoy. Hi, Oteil.
Hi, Mike.
Wow, you sound fantastic today.
I feel fantastic.
What's making you feel so fantastic?
I don't know. Everything feels so clear and maybe it's our new throat spray that we got when we got our first new sponsor.
Ba-ba-da-da. Choir Throat 37.
All natural. Let's see what it's got in here. Echinacea,
Cool
green tea leaf, elderberry, thyme herb, red clover, myrrh, kelp, how much more natural could you get?
I mean, I don't think you can. And it's in this amazing little spray bottle, and it doesn't numb your throat. It just gives you that nice, mellow feeling. And as you know, professional podcasters now, and a comedian and a singer, an amazing singer, and an okay comedian.
Amazing comedian.
Thank you, Oteil. We have had that where you're on the road or you're feeling raspy and you can't get that nice feeling, that nice smooth feeling. But Clier has created an incredible product and it works. And now comes a time listeners can get it at home, 10% off Throat 37 at clier.com/throat37 with promo code TIME. That's CLYOR.com/throat37. Promo code TIME.
Try it out.
Yeah, I
did.
think you should get it.
Because when I podcast, I do this. And so it makes it better when I do this.
Enjoy it, and thank you for listening, and go support our sponsors, Clier.
And remember, it comes a time as part of the Osiris Media family. You can catch all the Osiris podcasts on osirispod.com.
Where did you you obviously have a huge heart and a ton of empathy, and it seems to come naturally. Some people unfortunately have to, learn it and force it every day. But even listening to you when you gave your speech at South by Southwest, you talked about learning vulnerability from some of your students. What was your school background like? Did you have a good experience in high school and, coming up?
Yeah, I mean, my school experience was not bad. I mean, my mom was a nun for 20 years before she ended up leaving the convent, and then obviously had me. But she was a big believer in schooling, education, and Catholic schools. And so we went to, both my sister and myself went to Catholic schools from basically kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. And then my mom was really clear with me, like, once I'm going to, take care of schooling up to 12th grade. And after 12th grade, you're on your own. You figure out your own college, your own loans, your own, whatever you got to do. I'm not helping you. I can't do anything else for you. But I never really had a bad experience with school. I think for me, I realized, because I was like in a private Catholic school and we did not have money. My mom was a Catholic school teacher. She worked summers as a motel maid at Motel 8. She worked summers at Burger King's. Like she worked random jobs in the summer to help be able to afford to send my sister and I to those Catholic schools. Wow. So I realized we did not grow up with much, to say the least. But I realized that, through that kind of being in that different environment, that like there were people that had a lot more, and that there was a way to hopefully, live a different type of life where everything didn't have to be a struggle, because we struggled a lot growing up. So, yeah.
You mentioned the, getting to senior year and then kind of you're on your own, that's something that you and I have in common. And my senior year, we were talking about money, how it's a money machine, how, school right to jail. In the suburbs, in a middle class, New England suburb, not rich, not poor, kind of right down the middle. We were being pressured. If you don't get a college degree, you're going to be nothing. You have to study for the SATs. You have to get this score. You have to apply. If you don't get a college degree, it's like not having a high school diploma. And then you get to college, you take out all the loans that you need to, because my parents couldn't afford school either. And they said, you're on your own. And I took out all these loans, still paying them off. I have a master's, I'm still paying it off. But then when you get to campus, there's tables set up. Sign up for this credit card and get a free Blacklight poster or a free Bob Marley poster or a free t-shirt or whatever, and everyone's just signing it up and getting credit cards. And now you're in that debt circle, student loans, credit cards. Yep. Education is, I mean, how many trillions of dollars in student loans? Did you feel, as someone who had the trust of a lot of students that were going into that transitional period in their life, were you able to have those tough conversations with them where maybe college isn't the right because perception again is reality. And we were told you're a ditch digger or you're a landscaper if you don't go to college.
Yeah. I mean, I did like, I want to know what you guys think about this too. Like, I don't believe everybody should go to college. Like,
Amen.
I don't think that
Amen.
is like
I never went.
like, I don't think everybody should go to college.
And I did.
I went, and it's for what I wanted to do, at that time, it made sense. But I just think that sometimes we sell kids like this false, notion about like, everybody has to go. And I don't think that everybody has to go. I think there are really great careers that you can have without college. And so there were many conversations that we had, not just myself as a principal, but like the school counselors or social workers, about like what viable options really were based on what the young person really wanted to do. Right. I think we have to get out of that mindset in our country. And this is probably the worst thing to say as an educator, but I don't think it's true. I think we set kids up for failure, because I can't tell you how many kids I've seen go and then leave midway through, a year or two in, and now you're saddled with $40,000-$50,000 worth of debt.
And you don't have the college degree, the almighty college degree to get that job that'll pay you a little bit more. And then you live a miserable life doing a job that you don't want to do to pay off those student loans that you were tricked into. So it's very interesting to think about, the two different, sides of the city or the town, urban and suburban, that are both funneling just the dollar. It comes back to money. And
it's always this, in a society like this that won't provide the tuition for the kids. Like if everybody's going to go to college, go to Canada and do it. Because, here, you're going to be saddled with this unbelievable, they're milking you, So I would definitely say in this country, maybe you find your own way.
I guess. I've thought about too, those transitional years where it's like maybe your senior year of high school into your freshman year of college is more geared towards those, life decisions, adult decisions on, how do we get, you spend 2 years doing liberal arts, right? At most colleges, you're taking your, I took singing because I had to have an art credit. I took these classes that I really didn't need. If I were able to shorten the span, focus on what I wanted to focus on, I could have got what I wanted to get done. I had an English degree. I got published. Great. It's all because of my advisor. She's the only one that kept me in college. But if I just was able to go rapid fire through 2 years, it would have saved me half the money. I would have maybe, finished earlier. And it's just, I don't think everybody should go to college, and I don't think college should be college. I really don't. It's just this whole disrupting, your perception. And how do we change that?
I totally agree with that. I think it's interesting. I think for me, the biggest thing always as a principal was let's just have every child prepared. Like, I think that was my big thing. Like a child should be, by the time they graduate high school, should be college ready. So they should be equipped with all the skills and tools and, things that would make a person college ready. But then they also needed to be equipped with information to make the decision that is then right for them about which path to go down. I think, unfortunately, what happens, especially in a lot of our urban environments, is, kids are either told you will never be able to do this. And so you're on this path of, you need to be, a janitor or whatever it may be. Not saying anything wrong with being a janitor, but say it again. I'm sorry, Oteil.
In prison is where they really
right, or something either different. I think then part of that is because I think in our country, especially with young people who are in poverty, we give them what amounts to, I forget the guy who says this, but he calls it like a sharecropper's education. And what he means by that is like, we give oftentimes our poorest young people access to like this bare minimum, bottom basic education that allows them to just do basic stuff. You can be the security guard, you can be the janitor, you can, be the checkout person at the grocery store. And not that those jobs those are okay, but like, let us give again, let's prepare our kids, have them college ready so they can make the choices that are ultimately best for them. And that's what we're trying to do, here at Chicago Beyond, which is the organization I started after Finger. is to really make sure that, you know, as we support different organizations, just making sure that kids just have opportunities, they just have access, and that they're not denied those, what I think are basic, fundamental human rights, you know, just to live a free life. So
it's crazy the things that school doesn't teach, you know, like back to the old days of home ec class and whatever, like, you know, I thought I saw something, you were talking about a guy fathered somebody. He was teaching, it was just a class for new fathers.
yes.
You know, I'm a recent father, even though I had my first kid at 50. And so you're just sitting there with this kid and you're like, there's no class they could have taught you in high school to just do the basics. Like, you know, you just thank God for your parents if you happen to have them, you know, and it's just, so stuff like that, I think, you know, they should put in high school, you know?
Yeah.
What was that guy's name? Father somebody?
Yeah. So the program is actually called the Dovetail Project, and it's run by this executive director, Sheldon Smith, who is phenomenal. He got the CNN Heroes Award a few years ago. He's just incredible. And he's one organization that we invest in. So we Chicago Beyond essentially invests in organizations that are positioned to support our communities in ways that are like critical to like their thriving. And so I've really positioned us to be not so much about charity, I think that's one thing, but really about like justice work. We've tried to root ourselves in justice work. And so thus far, we've invested in the last 4.5 years, almost like $35 million across our city in different organizations, different initiatives since 2016. But beyond that, beyond the dollars, there's a whole team here at Chicago Beyond. There's 10 of us, and we are geared towards helping those organizations succeed. And so everything from helping them build up infrastructure to strategic planning to like whatever it is they might need to help them grow, and not like in some paternalistic way because, oh, we gave, you know, the Dovetail Project, for example, $1 million. Now we can tell you what to do, but rather Sheldon's a really smart guy. We're some smart folks. We're at the same, you know, we're at the same level. Let's work together to help, grow that organization without the power dynamics being involved in that, which oftentimes charity does. It brings in like this, you know, I'm giving someone some pittance of something and you should be thanking me that I'm giving you this. I just don't believe that. Like, this is justice work, you know, like there's a reason why those dads are out there in the situation, those young dads he's trying to help are in the situations that they're in. So
you would rather just leave the bag of money on the steps and when they wake up, it's there and did not even know that it was you. Congratulations.
I would rather not even leave the money on the steps. They didn't know it was me. I would rather acknowledge why they need the money. Like, why are our communities in the state that they're in? They're not there because Black or poor people or brown people are lazy or dumb or they don't care. Like, there's structural things that have existed in our country, like structural racism and redlining and things that actually, you know, lead up to where we are today. And so when I say we're rooted in justice work, it's really acknowledging that and then, you know, making sure that we are truly walking hand in hand with our partners and helping them fight the good fight on behalf of our young people. So
yeah,
it's phenomenal.
Structural stuff is hard, man, especially when the violence, at some point you gotta, you know, you're brushing up against the violence and the corruption and the whole thing, the evil money machine that keeps it going. It's gotta be really tough, you know, but I thought, you know, this guy Anand Giridharadas.
Oh yeah,
he's like, he looks Indian. I don't know what his actual ethnicity, but he has a really
he's got great hair.
She's got a hair.
Anand Giridharadas. He wrote yes, he's got great hair.
But his whole thing, I was interested in what he said about, you know, the philanthropy with strings attached. You know, it's like fake philanthropy. You know, so and so gave, you know, $1 billion to historically Black colleges. You know, it's like, okay. What is that? What, you know, does that come with? So I really dig how you're approaching that to like deal with the why and not put the strings on it. You know?
Yeah.
I hope.
Do you see yourself laying out a footprint for other states, other parts of the country? I think it's something we all need to realize, that like the experience in Anchorage, Alaska isn't the same as it is in, Miami, Florida, but it's issues everywhere. So do you feel like there's Chicago Beyond is clearly a beacon for other communities? Do you have conversations with folks all over the country on how to, set out on the path of righting these wrongs?
We do. That's actually funny you say that. So that is the Beyond. That's why we named it Chicago Beyond. The work was always meant to happen here in Chicago, but the ideas were meant to travel beyond Chicago. And so I'll give you a couple examples of how that's playing out. So one, we're working with the third largest school district in the country, which is Chicago Public Schools. And we're working to develop a one-of-a-kind blueprint for like holistic trauma supports for over 300,000 kids. That's a lot of kids. And we know that our kids, like just by virtue of walking back and forth sometimes from schools in particular neighborhoods, like there's like these mini traumas and things that happen in homes and in neighborhoods. And those kids might come to school and they may not be the ones who are acting out or even bullying other kids. They might be doing anything, but they're still suffering from the effects of trauma, as are honestly some of the teachers.
Yeah. Totally.
And so we're developing this blueprint. It's actually being piloted this year. We've been working on it with Chicago Public Schools for over a year now. And it's rolling out this year, even amidst COVID. It actually ramped up us working together and making sure to get that out. So it's one. And then that will travel, right? Because Chicago Public Schools is positioned how it's positioned in the country. Like people will look at that and see that, and that blueprint will ultimately travel out. We also, for example, created a guidebook on how research can be done more equitably in our communities. A lot of poor communities are often over-researched. And so we wrote this guidebook called Why Am I Always Being Researched? And it's been downloaded.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And nothing changes.
Right? Why am I always being researched?
The object is just the research, right?
Yes. There was a kid that asked us that question. He said that's literally how it came up with the title of the guidebook, was because this kid said to us, who was in one of our programs, he literally said, his name is Jonte. He was like, why am I always being researched? He's like, why are there all these researchers in my community? And like, whatever happens with that? And so we wrote this guidebook. We've been kind of thinking the same thing. So we wrote this guidebook and we titled it with what he said, Why Am I Always Being Researched? And it's been downloaded in more than 70 countries, in more than 50 states, and the Gates Foundation, which is like the mecca of all the foundations, is using it to help guide their kindergarten through 12th grade research standards as they're redeveloping their research standards to become more equitable, specifically as it comes to education. So There's a couple examples of our work, how it moves, but, it's everything from how we even responded to COVID. We had a huge food effort that we did. We got out we fed, I think, over roughly 10 weeks or so. We got out, I think it was 1.2 million pounds of food. We fed 60,000 families, got 1,000 gallons of hand sanitizer out. And so that could be construed as charity. But what we did, instead of just giving it to organizations, we set up they set up these networks for them to communicate with one another. And so it was more of a mobilizing and grassroots ground effort for them to move food into those nooks and crannies where food wasn't getting, despite city efforts. And so I just think that, we can't tell anybody what to do, but I think there's a better way to do philanthropy. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. So
that's phenomenal. And I think that one of the sentiments of that is that I think a lot of people don't know how to ask for help. I think that there may be certain people in certain communities that are just I don't know what, and just certain people are how do we help? I think there are some folks, like you said, to mobilize and say, let us know what you need. If there's, hunger in your community, let us know. We don't know unless I think there's the lines of communication and resources like that are so vital. Because there's no shame in saying I need help, mentally, financially. I mean, it's important to be able to be vulnerable and say I'm in need right now, all the way down to a student that's experiencing trauma, walking from home to school, walk in and be able to say I'm in need of some assistance right now.
Yeah.
Well, if your
We're
school,
so disconnected.
Yeah.
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 if your school is an actual safe haven that can provide that, then it's a good thing. But when everything is disrupted and disconnected and you're just screwed,
Yeah.
Just
We had an episode on mental health with these folks that run for musicians, touring artists, their families, about life on the road, and to be able to create a support system for folks that are in need of mental. A lot of folks' existence with COVID was wiped out.
Yeah.
So I mean, and what I had a hard time thinking about, and a friend of mine that's in education told me this, was that a lot of families depend on school systems feeding their children
Yes.
during the school day. So that's added expense, that's added stress, there's so many. So the point of when we were talking to those folks about mental health, I mean, setting up, like you said, just a support system of new anxieties are coming from all angles. You're like, oh my God, now I have to feed them lunch. That's got to be such a heavy, weight to bear.
Yeah. I also think too, COVID is just, in my opinion, the COVID-19 is just our nation's report card on racial equity. It's our report card on how we're doing overall. And I think that in so many areas we failed. We were seeing, because we were getting into the nooks and crannies of communities, right? We partnered with over 50 organizations and, small organizations across the city to, get this food moving. And we were seeing people line up because, they got used to it. It was like a routine, right? They got used to, on Tuesdays at, X organization, there would be these boxes of food that if you get one, it essentially feeds your family for an entire week. But we were seeing people line up for food for an hour or two ahead of time to make sure they got a box. And to me, what that signaled was great. I'm glad we're doing that. But it is a fundamental justice issue there when we think about what the hell is going on in our country where people they're not making enough. These are not working people, not people who are who had lost a job and didn't have enough saved, to be able to afford groceries that next week. And I just think it's how do we treat all of our citizens, whether it's regard to healthcare or education, but I just, and I'm not proposing I don't know. I just think we've got to do better as a country. We just got to treat all of our citizens better.
I've been saying recently, and I got this from Anand and a podcast that he did with Andrew Yang, and he was saying, the marketing is terrible. It should be looked at in the context of patriotism and loyalty. He's like, you should make the commercial in Normandy, we didn't leave anyone behind because we're America, and you wave the flag, and then you go, and healthcare is the same way. We don't leave any American citizen behind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
yeah.
How come all these other countries that are capitalist allies of ours, first world nations, everybody has their education provided for, everybody has their health care, and there's no private prisons. It's not that the government isn't preying on its citizens. It's because they look at those citizens as the sons and daughters of Ireland or Australia or wherever, Spain. And we just don't look at our citizens that way. I guess don't look at all of us as humans, because it's really even beyond the sons and daughters of this nation. They're just humans.
Yeah.
What's with your brain? How do we get brainwashed because some people aren't humans and just screw them? That's got to be disrupted for sure.
Totally.
And I don't.
You think it'll?
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add one thing that I'm not saying substitute socialism or communism for capitalism, right? Because I think human nature. The poor people end up getting screwed in every system. We can look at examples of each one, So there's something just basic and human that we got to get back to. Like you say, it's justice. I just think we maybe should frame it differently, because when they hear justice or social justice, something, they just go blank and they're like, wow.
Yeah. Well, we all rise together, which is what I say. Like there's like this triple bottom line of like, it's not just that, if we were to give people access to healthcare or a living wage or those things, that those people just do better. We do better those families do better, those kids do better than those families. And ultimately, I think we as a society do better. Like, but I'm with you.
Better, right? Like if all those people are spending more money, then capitalism's doing better.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? It's just a long-term versus short-term capitalism, I guess,
It also boils down to, in all reality, if anybody thinks that this system is working right now, then I can't, I've got some magic beans to sell you, because this is just, I mean, I saw,
Me too.
I've seen interview after interview online from local news networks talking to folks who, and for no reason do they have to share their past, but never been unemployed their entire life. And due to some of them working in senior centers, planning activities for elderly, and now they're unemployed because of COVID, and due to, a glitch or a technical error when entering their name or some clerical mistake, they haven't received their unemployment. They're spending all day, every day on the phone. They're begging family members for money. And then they say, oh no, everything's working great. Nothing is working great. And it doesn't matter what town, what state, what city. It's like the curtain's been drawn, and
yeah,
to disrupt is somehow, it asks vulnerability. It asks for, like some transparency. So
yeah,
an interesting, I love that word though. I love again, just like Oteil said, sometimes people hear social justice or defund. It's kind of like, whoa.
yeah,
Disrupt and redefinition of what we're going for is, and it's not smoke and mirrors. It's just real. Like we talk racism, we talk, it's human rights. It's humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Humans.
Just human beings.
That's
We're
it.
just so far away from each other sometimes. I think that's part of the problem is like, as the, racial wealth gap widens, as like between rich and poor, like things just widen. I think we're so disconnected from each other. And I think if we were more proximate to each other, we wouldn't see it as like that. We wouldn't otherize and think, oh, that's that other person over there. It would be more about my neighbor or someone I know, but we can tell these stories and have this otherizing happening because we're just not proximate to each other in the ways that I think really matter to help us make decisions. Because really, and I've always believed this since I can't even tell you, probably definitely since I've been teaching, but the power is always with the people. Like I believe we could change the system as it exists now to exactly what you both are saying. And it could change, rapidly and fast. The power is with the people. I just think it truly is up to us as individuals to vote and vote people out of office and be conscious and be aware of what's going on and be relentless with our politicians. I mean, we saw how, fast that first stimulus check came out. I mean, things were moving and grooving, and I mean, stuff was, and then all of a sudden it stopped. And I just think really the power is with the people, and we can do better. We can do better.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing that. I think one of the things that inspired me so much about Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard too was, they didn't say, oh, because I've heard a lot of my liberal friends say, oh, what's a shame about Citizens United? That if we could just get I'm like, no, you don't have to wait for Citizens United to be overturned. You could say, I'm taking money out of my politics. I'm not taking money from anyone but you. Like, wow, they just made the change. And I think that's what's blown my mind so much about what you're doing is you're just like, I got to wait on anything. We're just going to make the change right here on this level, even with this, the small contribution. And you handed out $35 million to people that are really, that's amazing. That's the kind of, just I'm not going to wait for you guys to refund the community. Guess what? We're going to fund it ourselves. So I think you're like a superhero. I'm inspired. You got me
You
fired
guys
up.
are kind. You're too kind. You guys are too kind.
Florida, I'm gonna get on it,
I'm
But I'll do something,
and I'd imagine you're a hero to a lot of young women in the Chicago area. That have you had any junior Liz Doziers?
Are you mentoring?
Are you mentoring?
yeah. I'm sure like you guys are too, right? I mean, like I think all three of us have had some semblance of what people would say is success in some ways, right? And so I think we all do it, right? I think it's about like, giving back and, connecting with people and giving advice and spending that extra. Used to be going for coffee, but now I get the Zoom chat or a phone call, with people and kind of helping them, make decisions and stewarding people along. And somebody did it for me. I mean, my mentor, Don Friend, who was the principal of Jones College Prep here in Chicago, who ultimately got tapped by Arnie Duncan, who later became the U.S. Secretary of Education under Barack Obama, but he was here in Chicago first, leading Chicago public schools. Arnie tapped my mentor, Don, to become like the leader of all this turnaround work. And Don is the one, turnaround school work here in Chicago. And Don is the one who ultimately tapped me and took a risk on me to become the principal of Fenger High School. And, the rest is history from there. And so he was a huge mentor of mine, a huge supporter of mine. So I try to do that for other people too, just like I'm sure you guys do too.
It's awesome.
Well, you're
so
doing a lot better job of it than I am.
We haven't handed out 31 million pounds of food yet, but we're working on it.
Just the investment in specific people, it's just like, wow, I just am in awe of that. And I'm in it, but it's not too late. South Florida's got a lot of needs, and you've inspired me to kind of plug in. I'm going to find it here and try to just put some energy on it. I got a lot of energy.
Well, that's actually a great point. And like for people who do want to get involved and people who do want to help, even in their own communities or at large, like, can you recommend? There's so much information out there that sometimes you Google it and then you're like, never mind. I'll just play, poker again on my phone. So can you recommend like where folks can go, locally or on a broad community level to help with education?
Yeah, I think, I guess I'd almost like back up and just say that I think sometimes really to help with education, first we have to understand how the education system got to be where it is, and to understand some of the disparities that exist in education, especially when it involves like race and people who are in poverty. And so I would recommend they can go to our website at chicagobeyond.org. We just did we're on the third part of a 4-part series where we're kind of did these town halls, if you will, and we recorded them. We've had up to, I think it's now like 100,000 people join us, which is like crazy. Wow. Like just didn't even know that many people would even come to our little shindig online. But we're just unpacking race, and then they can watch those videos. They can also get like these toolkits where we talk about some of the historical elements there. So I encourage them to go to chicagobeyond.org. But also I would just encourage people to get closer, like it's not the thing over there. And so see what's happening in their local school districts, to see what's happening potentially in school districts or schools like across town, to just become informed voters. I think so oftentimes, and I feel almost embarrassed saying this, like, when you go vote and you're voting for like judges and politicians and stuff, like, you're just not always aware of, like, for me, I'm not always aware of all the different like people and what they represent. And so I've committed to this year, like using like websites to help me find out like, what do these people stand for when it comes to education? Like, how are they, I just think it's just being informed and educated, is a big part of it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. What do you guys think? I mean, what do you think people need to do in terms of changing communities?
Like I think about, there's a lady down here that was running for office, and I started following her because she was very progressive and trying to oust someone very bad that's one district over from me. And I went to a couple of her rallies. This was up during the primaries, and I saw some people in the local community there that she brought up to speak. and I didn't know who they were, but I learned who they were from being at her rally. And I'm thinking she's one of the first ladies that I'm going to call because she knows where the need is. She's in there on the ground. And that's where all I got to do is show up and go, how can I help? They'll be like, you get over here and do that. And you go over here. You got a car? Okay, we could do, I'm sure they'll put me to work.
Yeah.
You just show up, Oh, you play music? Okay, blah, 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 So that's why I say just like there's people in need everywhere. Wherever you're at, there's somebody in need within, 15 minutes probably. Right?
That's true. That's so true.
And I would say that I think that what we can do is interview the Liz Doziers of the world, and I mean that there's heroes in all pockets of our country. And no matter what, maybe one of them is getting their first principal job right now. And they're, going to be you in 10 years in their community. So I think it's a matter of giving people an outlet to listen and learn and a platform to share messages.
Yeah.
I think that's extremely important. But yeah,
that's so huge, Mike. That's huge. But I think people think that there's only they look sometimes at communities and they might see, the 2 or 3 community leaders, but like you're saying, there are like thousands of them here in Chicago. Like only a few of them get shine where people recognize them, but there's thousands of them. And so utilizing what you guys have, this platform to put people on and to allow people to see their work is so powerful because it in some ways validates them, not for themselves, but for the outside world. It validates them and it makes their work real, quote unquote. Do you know what I'm saying? And there's power in being validated by the, powers that be, or by the establishment, or by TV, or whatever the thing is that helps people do their work in more bold ways. So that's really good. That's
awesome.
Good.
Well, we got the thumbs up from Liz O'Teal, so that's good.
2 thumbs up. 2 thumbs up.
We'd love to have you back. You did a whole episode on race, and I remember you talking about coming from a biracial background, how it helped you to relate to people that felt kind of on the outside of things. And I would love for us to be able to talk to you about that because, my family on my mom's side, you can't tell they're not white. That was part of our episode on race. So I grew up with people that look white and black, but all being considered black, but still negotiating all that, even just within the black community, right? So
yes,
your experience is like what my son's experience is going to be. And then me and my wife, who's white and from North Carolina, we adopted a little girl from India. So we're thinking about, even the kids' books are all different, trying to.
I love that.
This whole thing. So I'd love to get you back to talk about some of that specifically, sometime in the future.
Anytime. Yeah, listen, it's COVID. I'm here. I got that. I'm on Zoom. You just, we'll Zoom up. I'll get a cool background again.
Yeah,
and we'll
just, pick another telephone room so we can see some more local art.
And I got to say, by the way, just as a quick thing, I love because this guy, whoever did this graffiti, was probably going to get suspended for all this stuff, and now he's got a job. It's like, hey, you're an artist. How about put him to work?
Getting paid a lot of money to do his artwork.
See?
It's all over Chicago. I mean, the guy is he's making money, let me tell you.
Good.
I love that.
He's suspended and then in the system and whatever, it's like, come on. So thank you for just on every level. You're just amazing. And
it's an honor to have you.
It is.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me. I was so excited when I got the invitation to come on. This is a really big deal.
It's our pleasure.
So thank you.
Really? I'm like, you've been on CNN and shit. We're
just two dummies. Where can folks follow you on social media?
They can follow me at Liz Dozier, and Dozier spelled Dozier. And they can also follow us on Chicago Beyond. They can go to our website, chicagobeyond.org. It has all our social media channels, our Instagram, our Twitter, our LinkedIn, our Facebook, all that good stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
We'll have you back. And thank you, listeners. Come back next week for another episode of Comes the Time, everybody. Peace.
We love you.
Bye.